Good morning and welcome to Signature Morning. My name is Godwin Sunday. This morning we'll be talking about the Nigerian Economic Summit. Although the summit must have come and gone, but there are a lot of lessons to pick from the summit. And joining me to talk about some of the issues raised in the summit is Abdul Rashid Gambazai, and who is a public affairs analyst. You're welcome to Signature Morning, Abdul Rashid.
Thank you, Mr. Godwin. Thank you, viewers. It is indeed my pleasure to be here.
All right, so the Nigerian Economic Summit have come and gone, but what lessons are in it for Nigerians to pick?
Well, from the first place, I think the reform that has been ongoing in the country, which include the immediate suspension, or should I say removal of fuel subsidy by the president on his first day in office, was something that sent ripple shock down to the nerves of Nigerians, of which it has set the tone for something that we can say it is going to set us on the path of economic prosperity. However, what are some of the impacts that this have on the citizens of Nigeria? It has plummeted us and put us into unprecedented poverty. People find hardship. The hardship has been alarming. However, it is some steps that it is required of us to take as a country for us to be able to reach the prosperity that we intend to achieve in the nearest future. Well, the assertion by Gill, the senior vice president of the World Bank, that we have to sustain these reforms despite the hardship for at least 10 to 15 years for us to be able to begin to see the fruit of such reform is something that I think I partly agree with, because yes, it is a move that requires boldness and courage for a leader to be able to take. It is a step that we need to take. However, it should be something that shouldn't have been done concurrently with the floating of the naira and then as well the removal of the electricity subsidy. So I think that three of these reforms shouldn't have gone at the same time. Maybe the president should have been more strategic and should have been more strategic and well plan this thing out before he begins to execute them. Like particularly, the removal of the fuel subsidy wasn't really planned. He just came on his first day in office, made the announcement that it is gone, and then it was gone. On that same day, things begin to skyrocket. However, I feel that there should have been a form of relief, a plan for relief for the Nigerians that should have been put in place to be able to make us persevere this hardship that this thing is meting upon the Nigerian people.
All right, thank you so much. As looking at the Nigerian government in general, we tend to shy away from conversations that borders on the micro economy of Nigeria. What I'm asking you at this point, part of the conversation at the summit, even though we've said that we should maintain 15 years of economic stability, but the microeconomy will drive the economy. And we're not having that conversation, but how can we even address the issues around microeconomy instability in Nigeria as it stands right now?
Of the truth is that microeconomy is it is one of the key driver of the economy, because we can't downplay the role that the SME contributes to the growth of any economy across the world. However, some of these policies that have been put into place are actually starving the SMEs. They are not giving them they are not giving them a good ground to thrive. So they are being strangled, and a whole lot of them are dying. It is of course why I said that some of these reforms are actually good, but then we have to put into cognizance the peculiarity of the Nigerian state, because in as much as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank are actually assuaging countries to agree that the removal of fuel subsidies and then unification of the currency are things that will drive the economy forward, I think we have to understand that as a Nigerian state we have our own peculiarity, and we should be able to understand that these things, putting them all together at the same time, is strangling the SMEs. It is not allowing these small and micro scale businesses to thrive. And then I believe that if these things are being done correctly and as they should be able to allow the microeconomy of the country to thrive.
So, but again, the World Bank also mentioned a thing about the purchasing power of Nigerian and the problem around inflation that has tend to becloud some of the economic and financial issues in Nigeria. But then, it seems as though we tend to be going round in circle in trying to address these issues around inflation. But what best way do you think, even as the World Bank has identified inflation as one of the challenge that we are having within that sector, how best can we now address the issue of inflation even in Nigeria?
As you rightly said, the country has been submerged into a double-digit inflation of about 33.7 recently. The implication of this is that if you have your 1,000 naira with you, it is the purchasing power has been weakened to, let's say, you're having an equivalent of 700 naira plus, because over 330.7 naira is being taken away from it. And then this is not unconnected to the fact that the fuel subsidy removal, which have caused the rising, which have implicated to the rising cost of commodities in the market, transportation costs, and all of that. I think these are some of the key things that actually contributed to the rising inflation. But then going forward, if we are going to capitalize on our production, we should try to see how we can deviate from fully dependent on the oil revenue to try and produce some other things and export. I think some of these things can be able to help us see how we can be able to reduce the inflation rates to let's say, yes, the inflation rate to a lower number, because it is actually critically high at the moment, and then the country is even unlivable. The living standard is extremely high, and I believe that if we can be able to see how we can focus more on production and possible exporting of our products, and then focusing on agriculture as well. These are some of the key things that I believe can be able to address the problem of inflation in Nigeria.
But then again, we've had several economic summits in the country, and one begins to wonder, is there anything that's going to come out from this particular economic summit at all? Even though World Bank have come out to identify some practices in Nigeria that seems to be abnormal, it tends to be at variance with global practice. This particular one, although the communique has even been issued, but then will anything come out in the long run?
Well, I'm a strong believer in the fact that in the long run, Nigeria is going to achieve an economic prosperity. Just as Mr. Gill, the senior vice president of the World Bank, said that we at least need a number of 10 years to sustain these reforms before we can be able to see yielding results. I believe that the sustainability of these reforms is something that can be able to launch us to El Dorado that we are hoping.
But have there been any reforms in the last 10 years in our economic journey so far? Because if there is no past, there might likely not be a future. So I'm looking at, have we been able to sustain something before now to be able to sustain something going forward? That trajectory.
I think the problem that we have is the lack of sustainability, because the economic reforms that happened between 2003 2007 in Nigeria were some excellent reforms that, if we sustained as of then, we wouldn't have found ourselves in this, and we should be. So the problem is the problem of sustainability, because the reforms during the 2003 2007 administration of Obasanjo were excellent, and then they were already setting Nigeria to the path of economic prosperity, which unfortunately it wasn't sustained in the long run. However, I believe that if these particular reforms that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is putting in place can be able to be sustained, then Nigeria is going to go to that point. It is going to join the Committee of Prosperous Nations.
Speaking of joining the Committee of Prosperous Nations, what we begin to say at this time, are we, in terms of practice, no longer on theory as a country? Are we really on that track right now? Looking at the purchasing power of the purchasing power of our currency right now, where you take certain amount of money to the market and you cannot even afford some certain food items. Are we on that track already?
Well, I can say that we are on that track, because if this, for the past 1 year, to an extent we can say that some of these reforms are beginning to yield some little result. Though the hardship that has been meted on the people of Nigeria is something that is to an extent unbearable. And then for Nigerians to be able to sustain this, the presidents have to show that he had to live by example by firstly cutting the cost of governance and then also leading by example. Like, you can't go and be driving an Escalade and then be telling the poor man on the street who is barely affording to eat a 1 square meal in a day that he should be patient with these reforms, because these are not things that cannot be easily sustainable. It is what actually triggered the protest that happened sometime in August. So if the president is going to be leading by example, cutting down the cost of governance, and then yes, now we're operating, we're having over 43 ministers, which is something that have grown. It has, the expenses of the government has increased. You know, you can't be doing things that are contrary to what you are enjoining on the Nigerian population to do. You know, yes, we are taking on, yes, it is hard, but then we are of the belief that just going forward, it is going to bring some sort of relief for the country, and then everything is going to, everything is going to be just fine in the long run. However, you have to show some level of leadership. You have to show some level, yes, you have to lead by example, like I said earlier. You have to show that yes, this thing is a thing that we are doing together. It is a two-way thing. If the Nigerian people will see that the president is willing, is showing that he's willing to cut down the cost of governance, is willing to cut down the cost of governance, I think the Nigerian population will be ready to also endure this baby step of hardship, like he said.
A lot of people have said that whenever World Bank, International Monetary Fund, the IMF, come into a conversation with a country and identify the loopholes in terms of its financial angle, then that country is about to be thrown into another financial chaos. That is, as it stands right now. Right now, the World Bank have come out to say if we can maintain a particular standard. Now, if they've identified this thing, do you think at this point that that theory it's going to even thrive in Nigeria?
Well, that brings us back to the peculiarity of Nigeria while trying to adopt some of these policies that the World Bank and International Monetary Fund are proposing. Yeah, I think it's this same policy actually failed in Russia some years ago in the 1990s, and then I think one of the key reasons why it failed is it was because it was run concurrently, like I said, because they had so many of these policies implemented at once, which actually put the country in a very serious economic mayhem, of which I think Russia find it difficult to even go out of that particular problem. That's why I was insinuating that some of these reforms are things that we should do them on a gradual basis. It shouldn't be something that we should just come and force on Nigerians all at the same time. Like, okay, I mean, you are removing fuel subsidy, and then you are floating the naira. Okay, countries that float naira, that float their currencies, are countries that actually have a very good production rate. Like, what do we produce in Nigeria? What is the rate of our exports, and all of that. Some of these things play a significant role in saying that floating of when you float your currency, it is your rate of production that is going to determine the market forces. Is what exactly is going to determine how your economy is going to be stable or not. So I think putting this thing all together at once is what is going to be the problem for Nigeria. We should consider taking it one at a time. Like, going forward, we try this one, we start with this one, and then going forward, we gradually bring on the rest. It is not something that can just happen overnight. It is not something that can happen all at once.
So
that's my honest
So Abdul Rashid, you're saying in essence that the World Bank and the IMF will not surreptitiously find a way to enter into the Nigerian economic reforms as it stands right now, to disrupt the system?
Well, I do not completely believe that they are coming in to disrupt the system, because these particular reforms that they are pushing are reforms that have worked in some other climes like Korea. Yes, it works in Korea and Norway. So I think we can be able to fall among those league of countries that were able to try these reforms and then it was successful for them. However, we have to put it at the back of our mind that we have this peculiarity as a Nigerian people. When we are bringing on a foreign policy to put upon ourselves, we should be understanding that us as Nigerian people, we have this peculiarity. It is what we should put into consideration.
No, but because why I'm asking this question, it's because countries like China have been able to grow internally, financially also. And it was due to some of the policies that Chinese people put together that they believe will work for them. Now, nobody predicted the Chinese economy in terms of reform sustainability for 15, 10, 20 years that is going to work. That means if the World Bank is saying this, we are curious at this point. Won't this be another master-servant relationship? Won't the World Bank begin to look for grey areas to begin to interrupt the Nigerian government in order to a certain extent make the Nigerian government come back to them to collect funds and to further accelerate the economic process of Nigeria? I'm just thinking, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think the case of China, if you look at it, it is something that, should I say, it is very different from many other economies. Just like you said, it wasn't even predicted. Their boom wasn't predicted. It was something that they worked hard for, and I think they were able to build systems that were able to work for them. They built systems, and then they focused to stand to it. And then I could even say that China do not operate a democracy, and then this should be one of the factors that I think help them to prosper on their own reforms that they adopted, that they are homemade. Yes, I also agree that yes, we can be able to grow homemade solutions to our problems, but then we do not have strong institutions. Say in Nigeria, we operate in the democracy. A whole lot of people getting to have a say on what and what not should happen. So I think that China was able to have a soft landing on that because they have a total control of their country, like unlike Nigeria where we operate in a democracy. What I'm still suggesting and recommending here is that while taking on these policies that have been recommended by the IMF and the World Bank, we should put into cognizance our own peculiarity as a Nigerian people.
All right, thank you so much, Abdul Rashid. But again, there are issues that borders on global uncertainties as it stands right now. Do you think with these current global economic uncertainties, Nigeria will be able to build a sustainable economy as it stands?
Yeah, I believe that it is possible for us to be able to, because if we're able to survive the last pandemic that dipped many countries, affected many countries, the nations around the world, economies were affected. Nigeria was able to kick out of it, and then we were able to grow our GDP and then go out of recession. We were so much into recession as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic earlier. I believe that the global economic uncertainty shouldn't be a bigger problem than the COVID-19 pandemic. So I believe that Nigeria can be able to go out.
But looking at the fact that even people are already complaining that the cost of getting food items is currently not just a Nigerian challenge, but it is a global economic pandemic as it stands right now. The global uncertainties, stock markets are becoming unpredictable, and we are saying we should maintain certain number of reforms. Is this even is this ideology going to work? Is this reform going to work in Nigeria from the look of things?
Well, I believe that these reforms are going to work. Like I said earlier, in the long run, they are going to work. However, we have to find a way how we are going to focus on agriculture. And then, the problem of agriculture here in Nigeria, what is declining our productivity in the agricultural sector is insecurity. So once we have been able to solve our insecurity problems, and then allow our agriculture to flourish, we mechanize it. I think some efforts have been put in place by the president, and some governors are already adopting it, which is, I believe that if we can be able to make full focus on the agriculture, we can be able to, yes, to actually grow out of this problem.
Abdul Rashid, I was in the course of the summit, the economic summit, I was looking out for conversations around rural economic development, where the rural areas begin to drive the market forces and determine the economic the economy of Nigeria. But we don't get to see more of that conversation even in the summit, and I'm curious, is it that the summit is designed in such a way that we are to advance the course of our economic and trajectory, as it were, or the summit is designed to, or introducing the rural area into the summit, into the economic blueprint of the country, will further delay in certain implementation of governmental goals? I'm just curious at this point.
Well, I think the president have already taken a step in that direction, where as you are aware that the local government have been granted their full financial autonomy, which is going to reach the grassroots. There's going to be massive grassroots development. However, this is just something that is being partly done, as I think the state governors trying as much as possible to see how they strangle their effort. Because as it stands, if we do not find a means whereby we see that either INEC or any other national body is conducting the election at the local government level, the state governors are still not going to allow the local government to flourish. Because you can see the happenings across the states in the country where the party that the governor belongs to is usually the party that sweep the seats of all elected chairmanship and councillorship seats in their various states. I think that is trying in a way to see that it comes in between the people at the grassroots, the development of the grassroots. I believe that if a 300 million naira can be going down to a local government in a month, it is something that can go a long way in trying to see how it can boost the economic activities of such regions. So I think the federal government should move swiftly into seeing how they can adopt the Orasanya report. I'm not in support of creation of an independent electoral body that is going to be conducting only the local government election. I believe that's more of like a duplication of the agency, of some agencies of government. I believe that the INEC should be donated the power to conduct the local government elections. By so doing, the local government chairmen are going to have the full autonomy that they can be able to decide for their own self, build massive infrastructure, invest in agriculture, and then allow the economic at the rural level to thrive.
Even though the local government is still trying to pick up its pieces, because this autonomy thing for most local government is still new to them. They still do not even understand the operational mechanisms. Because I think just few local governments even understand that they will be given autonomy in Nigeria. But then, speaking of local governments and the National Economic Summit, are you now recommending that the local governments should also start organizing their own type of summits? Or should we begin to have a local government summit, then now move it to the state summit, then all of those summits should now be incorporated into the national body of that is the national summit? What do you think for us to have a more holistic overview of the Nigerian economic policies?
Well, I believe in that assertion you just made, that the local government should look forward to organizing their own summits, of course, because they are the ones that understand their problems and then understand how best to address them. So if they know that this is the particular problem that if they address is going to bolster their economy, it's going to boost their economic activities, I believe they should be having conversations around how they can boost their own activities, just as it happened in the state, at the state level, and then, as you said, to come and be incorporated at the national level. I believe that should be a way to go.
So as it's not going right now, this economic policy, it's likely not going to work.
Well, it is possibly going to work because I believe the financial autonomy that the local government have gotten is something that have not been long. It just happened some few months ago. I believe that going forward, it is going to begin to happen, because once we have quality leaders occupying the seats of the chairmanship at the various local governments, I believe they can begin to start thinking outside the box and then bring some of these things on the table to discuss and then find a way to economic prosperity for their locality.
All right. So, looking at what the World Bank have said about the Nigerian economy and its reforms policies and what have you, I'm curious again to ask at this point, by the statutory provision of our laws, does it permit the World Bank or any other international monetary organization to be able to predict a country's economy to the point of even bringing that conversation to the national summit?
Well, I think it is something that it is the Nigerian state that gave the World Bank and the IMF the freedom to do so, because it is a policy that they postulate. It is not something that they can force upon a country. It all boils down to the country on whether they are willing to accept and adopt such policies that the World Bank and the IMF are proposing. There are a whole lot of countries that do not subscribe to that, most of these policies that the World Bank are proposing. But the Nigerian state have already taken the step of adopting some of these policies. And then the only thing that I feel need to be done is for us to be putting into consideration our peculiarity while we are heading to some of these reforms that are being postulated and then brought by the IMF and the World Bank.
Again, in the course of the economic summit, we were expecting to see the whole Nigerian economists coming together, converging at the point and having groundbreaking innovations that can take us from where we are to another level. But we didn't have those kind of conversation. Rather, it was more of a regurgitating ideas that spilled in the course of this summit. I want to ask at this point, should we be also having Department of Economics in school, or we should rather change the name to something else?
Well, it will be a great idea to have the Department of Economics in schools, because now knowing about the economy is something that is
even when we can't provide enough solutions to salvage the Nigerian economy as it stands right now.
well, I think if we can begin to put some of this mentality down to students growing up, like, yes, passing through schools, you're beginning to know more about the economy of the country. Going forward, I think that's going to play a significant role in saying that. In saying that we are heading to where we are targeting to go.
All right. So just before we even I let you go even this morning, let's look at the issues that surround the Nigerian economy. People are already proposing in many quarters that the economy should be channeled in such a way that teenagers begin to drive the economy in terms of production in the economy, like secondary schools can be used as a vehicle to drive development. But you are an analyst and you have a vast understanding of the way the economy works. Would you rather prefer that teenagers begin to drive the economy, or we should debunk that ideology?
Well, I think that idea should be debunked, because the economy is something that is very complex, and then it requires a whole lot of time, commitment, and dedication.
But they look more agile.
Yeah, to a large extent, they look more agile. But then, to what extent can we say that they've been able to? Because you have to study the economy around the world to see what are some of the policies that these people adopted that was able to work for them, and then which are some of these policies that were being put in place and then they were not able to work. So I feel it is going to be putting us into a serious risk by considering the secondary school student as the key actors of driving our economy forward.
So if the youth are not willing to drive the economy and the adults are seeming very weak to drive the economy, we shouldn't look at the teenagers to drive the economy.
Teenagers have a portion that they can be able to contribute, but then I don't think that they should be the focus, like the linchpins of the driving the economy forward. Secondary school, we're talking about secondary school. At secondary school level, you will be exposed to very little about the economy across the world and the country, particularly, for you to be able to think of bringing decisions that will help prosper your country.
Well, what about agricultural proficiencies? Probably planting and crop rotation, animal husbandry. If they focus the Nigerian teenagers on the agricultural sphere, so we can drive from that point.
Yeah, exactly. The Nigerian teenagers can be able to join in the drive of the already agricultural drive that is going on in the country. It is massive, and then I think yes, they have a role that they can be able to contribute toward that.
All right. So, lastly, on this conversation, should we or should we not listen to the World Bank as it stands right now?
I believe that we should listen to the World Bank. We should try to see how we can be able to sustain these reforms for the next 10 years and see where they are going to drive us to.
Well, thank you so much, Abdulrasheed Gambaza. I want to say thank you for finding our time to be with us here on Signature TV. We'll go for a short break, and when we come back, the show continues in a moment. Please go nowhere.